Hello and welcome to the Surveyor Podcast with James Baker and John Lever. Two chartered surveyors embarking upon a social media journey, locked in a virtual room with nothing better to do than to discuss everything surveying. And some things not.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest edition of the Surveyor Podcast. Before I introduce today's session, I will say we've got Sam Nicholson with us again today. Great to have you back, Sam. I'll pass you over to John so he can just give us a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, we've had some people feedback on our ServPod website, so www.servpod.com, and fill out the feedback form. And this one was from Kelly Allen. And Kelly says, "Thank you for your podcast. I particularly enjoyed listening to a couple of pods with Sammy." Sorry, Sam. It's just a funny name. And Sam set up the Q&A group, which we keep shouting about. So if you haven't heard about that or want to get involved with that, Sam's doing a cracking job with sort of just a APC Q&A group that they meet up every week. Feel free to send us an email at servpod@gmail.com if you want to know any more. We'll pass it on to Sam. And it's also said the sessions with Sam were fantastic assistance for their own APC, or for her own APC journey, as well as our roadshow. So thanks for that, Kelly. It's really nice when we get some feedback and people are appreciating what we're up to and what we're doing. So there we are. That's the feedback for this week.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I'll stand corrected. We've got Sammy Nicholson with us today, not Sam Nicholson. Your new name now.
Some of my friends call me Sammy, but I don't know where it comes from. It gets shortened to Sammy Nick, as in instead of Sam Nicholson, but it's a little bit less formal.
Yeah. In future, I'll introduce you as Sammy Nick then.
Sammy Nick then, yeah.
Sammy Nick.
And to slightly backtrack, on the previous podcast, it was a special guest. You missed that off the start.
Oh, you're not a special guest today?
You're not a special guest anymore, Sam.
You're just part of the furniture now, mate. You're just...
Is that after 2 or 3 then?
Yeah, well, you said you were getting a little bit overexcited about it. Also, we're just cutting your legs off and pushing you back to where you need to be. No. The reason. Well, I think we ought to tell our listeners the reason we've got you involved is because we enjoy the interaction. You've always got something good to say, so we might hopefully see you at quite a few of these in the future. So all of a sudden, a 2-man team's turned into a 2.5-man team. So. There we are. Until you're chartered, you see, you're not going to get anywhere.
No, you're only a half, Sam.
You're only a half, Sam. At the moment.
There's me.
But no, it's a good topic today. Shall I introduce the topic, James? Seeing as
feel free, John. Yeah,
I go for that. Well, basically, the reason we are doing today's podcast, we've called it, was it Presentationickery, as in presentation trickery, as it were. Play on words there. The reason being is because I keep seeing people talking about, I haven't attended a online version of the mocks, the interviews, not the mocks. Or I haven't, I've got candidates, what should they do? Hold a piece of paper up in front of the camera, for their presentation. All of a sudden then my blood boils and it's like, no, don't give them such stupid comments and ideas. That's daft. You've got to maintain professionalism. So that was kind of the thought process behind today. And why I thought it would be a good hot topic and very timely, because everyone is now prepping for their presentations as well.
Very timely.
We ought to talk about it. And Sam, being in the room, can give his candidate eye view over our assessor eye view. So that was kind of the thought process behind today.
Yeah, great. Okay then. Well, we'll whiz through a few different things then, and we'll do it slightly into interviewee format, John. Okay. So, being the APC expert that you are, I'll be the compere for the show, and we'll bring Sam in, and Sam can chip in as he goes. So first of all, then
I'll have a couple of sugars with mine, Sam.
Okie doke.
John's
really taking the brunt of it today. I'm on a roll today, mate. Sorry, just and away.
John's delirious because we've got a weekend coming up. Yeah, it's all that chocolate he's already started eating.
Yeah, I've got a day off.
Right. Okay. So let's start at the beginning then. Really, probably best if we run through what is the actual requirement to present at the final assessment, John.
Okay, so if you look at the candidate's guide, and there's a new version of that, as in it was new last year, August 2020 is the latest version. I haven't seen an updated one since. In there it says, well, obviously it's a 10-minute presentation. as part of the hour-long interview. Got to present your case study. Please do make sure you present your own case study. I've had candidates before not do that, and that's basically heading down the referral street straight away. And it's got to be professional. Now, part of that in there as well, and if I just quote, I'm just going to find the document. It basically says, using video call technology, you will be able to share any content, for example, presentation slides, images, project documents with the assessment panel. Now, I worry with that because I'm not entirely sure, and I'll take your view on this, James, as a fellow assessor. I'm not entirely sure I'd want a candidate sharing project documents with me because you just don't have time, and what would we be looking at? So I think it needs to be something visual, either a number of slides but not too many, or a single handout. So I think, the guidance given, I can kind of see where they're going with it, but then we're getting people going, well, what does that mean? Do I then start holding things up in front of the camera? It's like, no, don't do that. So basically, 10-minute presentation on your case study, but with that comes a lot of other things to think about.
Yeah, I would probably agree with what you're saying, John. I think I'm not sure I'd even want a handout, to be honest. You certainly don't want project information. You've got a copy of the case study as an assessor anyway, which you read before the assessment. The candidate then presents on it, and you can form another opinion or think of other things whilst they're talking about that. So, yeah, I don't think that you need any other documents. I think that just the submission of the case study is fine by me.
Yeah, and then it'll come to visual aids as well. I mean, Sam, what's your thoughts coming from your side? What's your game plan?
So my game plan is to share my screen, to be honest, and have my visual aids as a last minute backup in the background, just in case anything goes wrong, to fall back on. And we're going to come on to this later on, but to make sure that I've practiced using Teams, that I've practiced the presentation, I know how I've set my room up and things like that, but we'll come on to those later on.
Yeah. But no, I think that's what you mentioned there as well. That's quite an important point. When we're thinking visual aid, don't just think about the slides. Think about, I always say to candidates when I'm running courses, you're actually your most important visual aid in this, as is the way you dress the room to a certain extent. Now, I'm not looking, I did have one candidate I saw, it was like in front of a fireplace with some beautiful flowers, and I thought, that's probably not the norm. But so I'm not looking for people to go out and start doing the sort of home improvement, dress in your room so that it looks nice for your assessment. But I would take down the towel you've got hung on the back of the door, or the ironing board that's propped up against the window, or whatever it might be. It's just have a think about your environment. But I think it's a really good point. It's not just the visual slides. It's whatever else, for the rest of the interview as well.
Yeah, it's what's in the background.
The panel will see in the background. And that's one of the reasons why I always use a virtual background at the moment, because the room that I'm in isn't very picturesque. Don't really like it. And when I move to my new office, which I hope will be lovely pine walls, I will probably not use virtual backgrounds so much. It's an interesting sort of balance with that. So, no, that's a good point.
That is a good point, actually. Okay, well, you mentioned there, John, the APC candidate guide, but let's look at what guidance is actually available.
Yeah. Okay. So you got the candidate's guide, and then you'll see various other things bouncing around, and some other guidance I'd seen candidates being given. If I can find it, there was another one that says, talk through your presentation. You can talk through your presentation without any visuals. Now, okay. Let's just put into perspective sort of the environment that you're in. We work in the surveying world, and in the surveying world, it's very visual, because what do? We go and look at buildings. What do? We look at contracts. We look at leases. You go and meet people, and you take photographs, funnily enough, when you go and do your building inspections and all these sort of things. To then say to a candidate, you don't need any visuals, I think you're missing a trick.
Well, let's look at it this way. Almost every surveyor you could possibly think of will look at some form of plan or drawing.
Yes, of course. Yes, I'd forgotten those as well. Yeah, and I mean, visual, it's everything, isn't it? It's everything that we're doing. I might even mention this later on as well, but I'll mention it now too. And as human beings, I mean, I've been presenting now for over 20 years. So, you tend to, when you do it for a job, you tend to look into how to do it best and what you're looking for. And as human beings, we take on board, 75% of what we learn throughout our careers, throughout our lifetime, we take on board through our eyes, through what we see in visual stimulus and all this sort of stuff. So I worry when I see things like, oh well, you don't need to have any visual aids. I think there's also a thought process that says visual aids are going to give the assessor something to look at, because to stare at a candidate for 10 minutes, even though you're online and it's across a screen now, not in the same room, is quite dull. So having something to visually prompt us about what you're talking about as well. And also, I think having some form of visual aid gives you as a candidate as well an opportunity to pace yourself and think it through. So I think to turn around to someone and go, you don't need any visual aids, I think is missing a point. Also, we're talking about professional presentation skills, and professional presentation skills, unfortunately, in my book, comes with presentation visual aids. So that would make sense. It then says present visuals to camera as long as they can be seen and clear, is another option. So, now let's put that into perspective. When we were doing assessments where you could send a PDF of your presentation slides to the panel, which was a year ago, having a flip chart which was really clear, simple, nicely in the camera so we could see you. And I'm always saying to candidates, a bit like what Sam's got today, you see a bit more of you, see the top of the table maybe, and we can see the visual aid on the table, but we've got that in front of us, so you're kind of still leading us through it. That kind of worked. But if you've got a flip chart now and you can't send the panel any slides or any handout, I don't think that works. And that, in my case, my advice would be your last ditch attempt should everything else fail. You've got that as a backup, but you certainly don't. You need that in a flip chart, as in an A-frame flip chart. You can't be holding that up to the screen, because
no, please.
How many times?
Please,
I mean, if I was to try and hold something right, I've got to see where the camera is, and then I've got to make sure I'm looking at the and then exactly. Where's it going to come to? And then all of a sudden, that finger that you've put on the screen is now bigger than your head. And that's not real, is it? So I felt that was a bit of duff advice. Well, not duff advice, but it's not the best.
It's not great advice, is it? I mean, you can't go holding things up to camera. I think that you only use such things if the technology fails. But I can't see a situation. I've assessed in this new virtual world, and I've not seen an issue where a candidate hasn't been able to share a presentation on the screen. And I just think you can't go down the route of holding up visual materials to a webcam. They have to, the lighting on them has to adjust, and the focus on some of them, and all sorts of stuff. And it's not gonna go well. You're gonna start panicking. The assessors aren't going to be able to see. They're going to be saying, oh no, can you just hold that back up again? I didn't quite see that. And it will just go, it just won't work.
No. So really, the only avenue you've got when it comes to what are you presenting is to screen share, really. But with that is going to come its own associated problems. Now, first of all, if you don't know how to screen share, and a lot of candidates haven't really practiced their presentations much or presented much, you're adding another layer of excitement to the whole process in an already nervous and stressed environment. So I think a lot of practice needs happening there, and it's they rightly so. It says share your presentation in teams. The first bullet point was practice. So yeah, that makes sense. Make sure notifications are turned off. Well, that's not just screen sharing. That's just general. Now, as a chair of assessors, I will always, in my checklist when we're first introducing the candidate to the process, when the candidate joins, I will always check with the candidate and the panel that everything's turned off that needs to be turned off anyway. So, but that's an important point to actually know and understand how to do that. One thing I've noticed actually, I use a lot of Google apps. I don't know if it happens with other calendars, but I cannot get my Google Calendar to stop notifying me if I've told it to notify me, if that makes sense.
I've managed to find a way, I think it's on the latest update of Windows, that you can put Focus Assist on. It's in the notification tray, and if you put Focus Assist on, it should, in theory, mute everything.
Right.
And stop any pop-ups happening, whether you get an email or it's Norton antivirus. It should get rid of all of that and just say whatever you've got on the screen will stay on the screen. Yeah.
On Mac, which is what James and I are using as well, it has a similar little notifications icon. But even if you go don't disturb until an hour, 2 hours this evening or whatever, the calendar still comes over the top of that. And I don't know,
All
I
right.
don't know what that is, but yeah, all I would say is then just make sure that either your calendar's turned off, because mine comes on with my emails. So make sure your email system's turned off, and then hopefully the calendar will be as well. And other things like WhatsApp and all those, you need to turn them off as well. Otherwise, they kind of ping over the top as well. And just noticed it's not turned off, so I'm gonna. Oh no, I had turned it off. Yeah, I look at my system tray going, but I've just said that, and it's no, but it is. I've just noticed it is now turned off. And then it says, if you're unable to share your screen for whatever reason, you must be able to carry on without it. Okay, so I think part of the game plan there is make sure you're practicing as well. So that in case you can't screen share, because it might get to the point on the day, might not be your fault, might be someone else's fault in the room, that the screen share's not working. So, you know, that could happen. So you don't want to be caught out, which is where I'm going with well, in that case, have a flip chart, because you can move a flip chart nearer the camera. So you can see it bigger, but it's still not holding it up. It's static, it's professional, you know, and it's thought through. And then the last comment, which made me smile, was the panel or RICS will not be able to help you. So please make sure you know what you are doing, and remember that once your 10 minutes starts, you cannot be allowed more time due to technical issues that you may have. Which was interesting, actually, because I'd not seen that anywhere else, because the guidance given to the chair is that we have 10 minutes to mess around with on the day should there be any technical issues. So I think if one of my assessors dropped out partway through the presentation, I think I would ask the candidate to pause, because of that, from that perspective. So I'm assuming that means that if you mess it up your side, you can't have another.
Yeah, when I assessed at the last session, I was told, and this is how we ran, you know, the interviews were run, that the time did not start until they started their presentation. So
That's correct.
the time, so you whereas when we thought the time started as soon as they kind of walked into the room, we did the intros, etc. Whereas now the time doesn't start until they start a 10-minute presentation. So it effectively gives us a bit of time back, actually, as assessors, which is great. But also that allows the intro to be given by the chair to the candidate to tell them what the process is going to be. But then also it allows for that technical problem to be resolved.
Yeah, no, I agree. And
or potentially be resolved.
No, it
So
would be, yeah.
yeah. So for me, what they're saying is almost contradictory to what we've been advised as assessors anyway, and certainly how the last session was run.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly correct. You know, the 60 minutes will start at which point the candidate's ready to start presenting. So as a chair, we would have done all of the checking everyone can hear. We would have done the introductions to the panel. We would have done the 360 degree. Don't get me started on that one again. We would have done the now you can screen share. Yes, can we all see it? Yes, we can. Okay, then over to you. So, I mean, that's kind of thought process on that. And just the other thing I want to add, definitely, I mean, the more you practice, the more challenges and problems you'll find, and therefore get over it. You know, just practicing once or twice screen sharing isn't good enough. What we did last session from the APC Roadshow, we asked people, do you want me to be online at a set time, and I'll be on Teams and give you a link and just drop in and literally just try screen sharing and see if it works, and see how it works for you. And they, you know, quite a few people took us up on that. So I just think any opportunity you have to get people around you, to support, because a lot of this is you can always have guidance, but until you get in there and do it yourself, then you're not going to realise what's going to happen. I mean, I was doing it the other day on Zoom, and I said, I want to share a video with someone, and let them watch it. And then it was like, do you know what? I hadn't tested this before the session because I'd forgotten to go give computer audio in the sharing process, you know, and it was just like, and they're all going, I can't hear it. It's like, yeah, my bad. Hold on. Sorry. Let me sort that out. Now, I've been presenting years. That sort of stuff doesn't faze me. It's like, yeah, I got that wrong. Bear with me, guys. I'll just sort it out. You know, no biggie. And everyone goes, oh, okay then. You know, if you're an APC candidate sat there and it's gone wrong, your stress levels are just going to go through.
Yeah, because you'll be nervous anyway. So yeah, that is not going to help.
Okay, Sam, what's your thoughts on this, mate, from your side of things?
I think it all comes back to this practice, know the platform and practice it on a weekly basis, just sharing your screen and how to stop the interview, start the interview, etc., etc. Not that I'm trying to scare anyone, but I have heard horror stories of assessors having poor connections and the interview being stopped, and then a new link's being sent, and starting the process again, which is going to be off-putting to say the least. But luckily enough, the person I'm talking about managed to pass, so it didn't phase him in this scenario. But I can see how it has the ability to knock somebody off their stride.
Yeah, and if you're not ready for it and you're not thinking about it, and you know, to a certain extent you kind of want it to go wrong in a way or whatever it might be. Now, as the other challenge that we also have as chairs is that we're pretty much just left to our own devices. So we had a candidate recently fed back to me going, I was sitting in the waiting room and I was sitting there and no one contacted me or no one dropped in to say hi or anything. And I was worried I was in the wrong room. Then all of a sudden, at the time of the interview, say it was 9:30, at 9:30, the chair invited me into the panel. It was like, whoa, you know, and then the chair had to kind of walk them through. Now, I don't think there's any screen sharing functionality that the chair has to worry about in Teams, but you know, if it goes wrong, you're down to the technical ability of the chair as well, who has in effect control over that room. So that, you know, there's a few angles that are kind of coming around this when we're thinking about screen sharing and visual aids. So
yeah, okay, right. Slightly different approach now. Just thinking about competencies and why I guess presenting might be important. Does presenting touch on any of the competencies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, it touches on a lot of them because of the material you're presenting, but the predominant one, which a lot of people don't really think about, is communication negotiation. Now, communication negotiation is a level 2 mandatory, and I'm constantly hassling candidates not to forget their mandatory competencies. And because it's level 2, not only do you know how to present, but you need to demonstrate that you can present. Now, it'll talk in there written, graphical, and verbal presentation. So in my mind, if you take that apart and you go, okay, well, what written, graphical, and verbal am I doing? Well, you're submitting your submission documents, and I got something in my eye all of a sudden. I would say your case study is where we're going to be looking at the written and graphical, because that's something you've produced offline and demonstrating your quality of how you write a report. On that note, if anyone is interested, on our free resources on our website, you can get our new case study template, which is the same as the old one, just looks pretty. And that's just under the members area. So deleve.com, click on the members area, and you can find free resources. So you've got the case study. Say again?
I'll say Sammy never misses a moment to plug something.
Absolutely not. No.
I haven't had a chance to mention this study group yet.
No, I've already mentioned it for you, mate.
Yeah, but I need to mention.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got a long way to go yet. Yeah, half Sammy still. So maybe 2/3 of a Sammy being able to start pushing stuff. Anyway, what was I talking about?
Anyway, you were talking about how presenting is communication to level 2.
Yes, indeed. So communication to level 2. So yes, where I was going with that, written, graphical, and verbal. So the submission that you send in, really, to tell the truth, what ARC produces, we're only going to be looking at the content of that, really, which is your summary of experience, your case study, your logbook, if you're putting a logbook in, your CPD. So written and graphical, first of all, comes through the case study. So we're getting that 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know what's wrong with me today.
3 or 4 weeks.
3 or 4 weeks. It's just all too exciting. I'm far too excited. 3 or 4 weeks beforehand, and so we're seeing the written and graphical there. Now, you then turn up on the day at the assessment, and you've got to do this professional presentation. So in my mind, there's a written, graphical, and a verbal element to that, because you're now demonstrating your ability to present. You're also communicating with us through the rest of the interview. So we've got a verbal event or part of that as well. So, you know, if you're hoping for the assessors who are always looking for examples of you experiencing doing, you're demonstrating that from the get-go, from the point you submit your documents to the end of that interview hour. So, you know, again, the whole point of, oh, don't worry about any visual aids, just drives me nuts, because as an assessor, will I ask you about communication in the interview? Probably not, because you're doing it. So, you know, unless you've managed to mess something up completely in your documentation, which I'd want to challenge or just have a discussion with you about, it's unlikely I'll mention that, and tend to, on that competency, communication, negotiation, is to defer towards the negotiation element, which is what most candidates ignore about and most candidates forget about. So it's very unlikely you're going to get a question of, what's a good communication technique or something like that at level 1, or can you give me an example where you've communicated, because you're in there doing it for us. So my worry here is bad advice, therefore don't use any visuals, is basically scratching away at that sort of that line that we're looking for you to achieve, which is the level 2 communication.
Yeah, I agree. I think as an assessor, I wouldn't tend to bother asking any questions about communication. It would all be, steered towards negotiation at level 2 rather than, or even at level 1. It's just communication comes through in the case study, as you say, and in the communicating on the day of the the assessment itself. So yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. So I think maybe we should kind of start moving into giving some hints and tips now. So Jon, why do you advise candidates should use visual aids?
Okay, so
you've kind of covered.
Yeah, I talked about it being 75% of what we learn we're taking through our eyes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's well, there's two things, isn't there, we've said already. One is the industry we're in is a very visual industry. So why on earth wouldn't you be bringing pictures of your projects to help embellish and help the assessors understand? Quite often when I've read a case study, and let's not lose sight of the fact you and I, James, have been assessing for years. I've probably done in excess of 2,000 assessments, so I've read a few. When you're reading case studies, it doesn't always fall into place. So when you then rock up on the day as a candidate and you're going to give us a fantastic presentation, very professional, and you've thrown a few visuals in, maybe they're pictures and images you've used in the appendices, maybe they're new bits or other information, that's going to start helping us get a much better understanding. Because I think the other thing candidates got to realise is we don't understand your project unless it's in the public eye. We wouldn't know it from Adam. So, the point of it is you bringing that to the table. So we're in a visual industry. 75% of what we take on is through our eyes. They say, don't they, the old cliche, a picture speaks 1,000 words. Well, allegedly, research says that if I look at a picture or I look at a block of text that's explaining a picture, I will take on board that visual information 60,000 times quicker than I can read it and understand it. So, all of these things is bumbling through my head. The other thing is, when we present, and as a presenter I'm always miffed about this, the audience will only remember 7% of what I say, but they'll remember 93% of the way I say it, the tone, the visual side of things. So again, why wouldn't you bring that to the table? And then in addition to all of that, which if that isn't enough for you, and I don't understand if it isn't, then you've got the whole point of, well, it takes the assessor's eyes off me a little bit, because then they can, and that's what we always said when you met face to face, rather than eyeballing the candidate, having some nice visuals to keep an eye on and see what's going on. So I don't see that's any different with an online version, and also giving you as a candidate a bit of structure to hang your presentation on as well. I mean, I've never seen, I know people who have, but I've never seen a good presentation or sat through a good presentation which was just the candidate talking to us.
No.
Now, maybe it's different for different pathways, but we're in the QS and building surveying world where everything is pictures, drawings, plans, photographs, and it's stuff that we want to see. Oh, what's that detail? Maybe it's just we're a bit nerdy. Are you?
Maybe. I was just going to add though, as an assessor, I don't want to see, you read a case study and you don't always fully appreciate or you're not always able to fully interpret what that project is all about until you see drawings, photographs, and then you can get a better picture in your own head of what you're looking at, and what it is. And that's why it's so vitally important to see, because everything you've said there, I think, must be true, because there's no way I just want to hear a candidate talk to me. I want to be able to see some photographs. I want to be able to see some drawn images, whatever, of what that project is, to really get under the skin of it and understand it in detail, so that I can actually ask questions at level 3.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Sam, what's your thoughts on this, mate?
I think it's, as soon as you don't have any visual aids, you're only making it hard for yourself. As you say, you've got painting the picture. A picture can paint 1,000 words.
Yeah.
And like you say, as long as you've got good, relevant, whether it's plans or pictures or however you're going to describe your project, then it's going to make a difference to get your point across.
Yeah, no,
And
definitely.
I don't see why. I have heard a story of somebody that passed without presenting anything. They just talked, and it
It
can happen. Eh?
It's not going to be a decider necessarily between getting through and not getting through. Really, I think. Yeah. Well, okay. The other feedback that we received in the past was because we were talking about online. When you screen share, you become a tiny little box. And one of the things in Teams I don't like in Teams, which I love with Zoom, is because we're all on screen now, and I'm as big as the rest of you, you're as big as I am on screen. You go to Teams and you the presenter, become a tiny little box in the corner. I haven't found any way of changing that with Teams. And then other people in the room become different size boxes and stuff. And the thing I've really found, which is one of the other reasons we use Zoom, is because it just works and everyone's the same size. And I was told, oh, well, you've got the other 50 minutes to monitor and observe the candidate when they're not screen sharing. And it's kind of like, yeah, but presenting's different to asking questions. And we're specifically being asked, did the candidate present well? Don't know, can't see them. Or did they, and so that, again, is one of the challenges that we have with the online side of things. Is you have that functionality issue as well. My personal view is I assess for the society who use the SCSI based in Southern Ireland. They use Zoom. I assess for RSS who use Teams. I have to say Zoom is a better experience, just purely because we can see each other much better on screen and in screen sharing mode and everything. You can make this, the images as large or as small as you want to. So, excuse me. So
I think I'd agree with you there, John. It seems to be a lot more intuitive. I need to get into the habit of using Teams once a week, just in terms of preparing for the assessment. So I know where the options are. I know how to share screen. I need to make sure I don't press the leave button when I'm trying to share the screen or something like that.
For those who've not noticed, that's a really good point. Those who've not noticed, I was on Teams yesterday, and I've been in meetings today. I've been on Zoom today as well. But I noticed that the share button, which is a little box with an arrow in it, is right next to the leave button.
Right next to.
And Teams does not give you the double whammy on the button like Zoom does. When you go click to end, it goes, do you want to leave? Teams just goes, boom, you're gone. Yeah. So whatever you are doing as a candidate, just make sure Shaky Hand Man isn't there on the day and you're wibbling around with that old mouse and all of a sudden you go to stop screen sharing and you leave the meeting, because that will be embarrassing. And all that's going to do, like it did for a mate of mine who sat recently, and he said when he did the 360, the data cable popped out the back of his laptop and he lost his connection, and it was just like, at that point, that's all you think is, and then you've got to kind of rethink what you're doing. So yeah, watch out for that, everybody. The leave button is right next to the screen share button, and I think that's a software programmer faux pas, personally. But
yeah,
there we are. Cool.
Well,
obviously they'll be listening to the podcast and they'll change that for the next update.
Oh well, I hope so. I mean, Microsoft, they follow us, so yeah. Why wouldn't they?
Right. Okay. So that kind of talks about why you should use visual aids. And you probably covered this anyway, but why do you advise that candidates present? Sorry, not why. What? Sorry.
What do I advise?
Not why.
Yes.
Not why. They don't get a choice.
I was going to say, I've just told you that, you idiot. Were you not listening to your own podcast? No. I take that all back, James. That was very rude. What do I advise them to present? Well, okay. So or what systems, wasn't it, do we advise them to present on? So I think we've said already, obviously you've got to present.
Well, we come on to systems, yes, as well, but at the same time,
the actual
the actual content, because you did mention this quite early in the podcast, but I think it's important to have a bit on it. What should they be, presenting?
Yeah, no, 100% agree. You can tell I'm quite emotional about this whole topic, aren't I? Because it's just, I just want everyone to excel and get it right, because it isn't easy. So what should you present? Now, someone asked me this the other day, and I said, well, your case study. And they go, yeah, well, what in my case study? Well, the whole case study. So really, the best thing you can do, hopefully you've written your case study as per the candidate's guide, where you got introduction, my approach, my achievement and conclusion. That would be the starter for 10. All right. The first thing I would then do is stick a cover sheet on the front of it. So I would have a something Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, APC Final Assessment Presentation, or Assessment of Professional Competence Final Assessment Presentation, and then I put the title of the case study, a photograph or artistic impression or a plan, something that's bringing the assessor sort of memory. Because don't forget, you are one of 4 in a day, one of maybe 12 candidates someone might do over a period of a week or two. They're not going to remember your documents straight away. So by sticking a picture of your case study, again, visual stimulus, easy to recognise, on the front cover, you're already building the assessor interest into what you're saying. And it's just human nature, that. And then your name and number on the front, and that's easy. And then literally you might have a contents page, and then you'd launch into my approach, my achievements, conclusion. The intro would be, here's the project, here's my role, probably half an hour, half an hour, half a minute. Oh, I tell you, I'm losing it today. Today's the wrong day. It's April 1st. Are you pulling my leg or something? No. It's not me. It's not John. It's someone else.
Here he is talking to people, telling them how to present, and he's making a complete and utter hash of.
No, I know. This is
a podcast.
Very embarrassing. So where was I going with that? Yes. So McDonald's. I quite like the Big Mac. What was the question? No. Okay.
Well,
back to
the lasting point to be made at the end of this. I will make it again. I'm going to make it now. Is so around presentation. Don't do what John's done today.
Yeah. Just don't do what I do. Do what I tell you, not what I do.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's start again. So the first 30 seconds to a minute. Don't forget to set the tone and set the scene. Don't expect the assessors to grab it straight away, because, like I say, you could be the last candidate of the day. You could be the first of the day. And there's 4 other candidates bouncing around, because I understand we're going back to 4 candidates a day now as well, because we were on 3. So that's the first thing. And then the intro needs to be, what is the project? What did I do? So great, photographs. Let's get some photographs, plans in there. Let's just briefly explain the project. Then we'll launch into my approach, which is key issues, options, solutions. Now, if you followed our guidance, you will have either written 1 key issue or 2 as a maximum, just based on word count, really. So you've got an option now. As an assessor, I don't mind either way. You can either present the whole range of your key issues, or you can just do 1 of them. What I would say, though, is if you've got too much material for 10 minutes, then you really need to think about just presenting 1 of them, doing it better, rather than rushing through the 2. Or if you've got more, which you might have 3 or 4. I've seen 4 recently, and it was like, you really are running out of word count now. That's going to be too much to present. So you've got to make sure the assessors, your client, have a good experience of your presenting as well. So it's got to be nicely laid out and professionally done. And then once you've explained the key issue, the option, solution, then it's the bit what we're really interested in, which is you reflecting on what you've done. So again, that's your my achievement bit and the conclusion. So the first thing I would say is you structure your presentation exactly the same way as your case study. You don't deliver any more than what you've already written, because that's the other thing. Get candidates going, oh, I was told I had to give an update, or, no, the guidance doesn't say that. It says present your case study. That's it. Doesn't say you have to give an update. So I wouldn't then bring new stuff to the table, and absolutely don't do what 4 candidates in all my years of assessing have done, and that's rock up and present something completely different, which is an interesting experience when that happens, because then I think I'm going mad and I've got the wrong candidate in front of me, or I've got the wrong set of documents, or whatever it is. And then when you go back and check, you see the whole panel. It's really quite funny. Quite trying to quietly panic from the panel side of things, as they're flicking through their documents going, I don't remember this presentation, or this wasn't the case. And it rocks up, and then as a chair you're stuffed, because you're sat there going, thank you for your presentation. Can I just confirm with you, you didn't present the case study that you put in your paperwork. Was that the case? It's like, yeah. And then if you do that, then the panel are just going to ask you questions around what you have submitted in your paperwork, not about what you present. And then probably promptly refer you at the end of the interview. So, so absolutely make sure you present your case study, but no more, no less, and do it in the structure it appears. And then the last slide, and this is a doff in my cap to Mr. Woodford, Clive Woodford, who comes to our APC roadshows. Yes, end on a high, end with some bits that you've done, and that's kind of really the conclusion anyway, what you've learned from the experience. But I always say put a thank you on there as well, so it doesn't forget to actually present nicely. Because I had someone, again, it was a mock interview just recently, goes, oh, that's it. What do you mean that's it? You can't just finish it all, that's it. Now, I didn't say that, but that's what's going on in my head. So, obviously what we're looking for is you to go, and that's the end of my presentation. Thank you ever so much for listening. And, I'd be happy to take your questions. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, you've got to end it. You can't just abruptly finish.
I've had candidates do that. They just
yeah,
stop.
so have I.
And you're sat there going, as the chair.
Well, you're there and you go in. So they're finished, or is this just a pause?
So no one in their right mind would do that. So, what's your thoughts, Sam?
I think it's key. We're talking about the end of the presentation there. I think it's key to point out the difference between saying "I welcome your questions now" and "any questions."
Yeah.
Because the assessor's there to question what you've just presented, and I think "I welcome your questions" is vastly different to "Have you got any questions?"
Yeah, of course we've got questions, you idiot.
Yeah,
that's what this whole interview is about.
I wish for the day we could say stuff like that. Great,
I think I'd be confident in that a lot of people, out of whether it's through repetition, would finish with "Have you got any questions?" It's a natural end to a presentation, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. And always bear in mind your client. So the fact that you've completed and finished and concluded well means that I now know you're done. So you're every step of the way, you're helping your assessors have a good experience as much as you. And a lot of people miss that. I've always said for years, it's a bit cliched, but it's about happy assessors. If you've got a grumpy assessor, you've not got a happy assessor who's not going to be then on your side. I mean, we desperately want you to get through. But if you really are messing it up at every step of the way, it's, an ill-advised. And I mean, the number of candidates, sorry, going off on one now, the number of candidates we see coming along to mock interviews where if we'd been able to spend an hour with them, just an hour, prior to them submitting their documentation, they would have a very different outlook on what we then see in front of us at that mock interview. And then it becomes a damage limitation exercise. It's kind of like, well, you do realise, that this isn't right, or you didn't really do very well there, or, well, it's too late now, you submitted that paperwork, so here's what you need to do on the day. And I had one, it was just recently, the case study wasn't written like the case study should have been written as per the candidate's guide. So the presentation on the day at the mock wasn't very well done. So the feedback to the candidate was, go back to the guide, reread the guide. You can't change your case study now, but at least you could present it in the right way, back to the headings and everything. So the panel are going, this isn't very well written. Oh, actually, they've presented it like we were expecting. Well, that's at least, head in the right direction. But you really want everything to line up and match. So, yeah. Challenging time. So that's what I would advise you present. And now, just a thought we ought to throw in here, James, for anyone who's listening to this, who's doing senior professional, it's a very different presentation. You're presenting your career history to date, not your case study. So please, now I've mentioned that, those of you who are doing APC, any other route, don't go and present your career history. It is your case study you are presenting. So hopefully I've made that very clear. I'll say it one more time, just in case, because they say you should always say things 3 times, that normal candidates, you present your case study based on your 3,000-word report. Senior professional, you present your career history, not any of your 3 case studies that you have to write. Okay?
Clear.
Hopefully, we'll find out soon enough when people sue us.
Sue you.
Yeah, this isn't under my name.
No, absolutely, Sam. Yeah, that was very quick. Yeah. Sammy 3/4 now. You're learning.
Sammy Teflon Nicholson.
Yeah.
Straight off.
Right. Okay. So what we should probably move on to is advising on what systems candidates should use, John.
Yeah. No, this is really simple. PowerPoint or something like a PDF. That's all I would say. Now, just be careful. There are other systems out there, like Prezzo is one, which zooms in and out a slide. It's cool. I like it. I played with it in the past. There's other stuff that I use called Doodly, which is where you can do animated handwriting on a screen, and you can set it to do none of that. I would just sit nice and simple, really beautiful quality slides, great pictures, a few keywords, and limit your transitions and your animations, basically. Also in Mac, I don't know what's the Mac version of PowerPoint. Is it?
It's Pages, I think it is, or something
Pages?
like that.
Yeah.
I've come across a one called Keynote before.
Oh, it's Keynote.
That's
Sorry,
it,
it's
keynotes as well, yeah. So something like that, PowerPoint keynote, something that's a very
Yeah.
simple slide. I think.
I would just stick with good old-fashioned PowerPoint. Nice, no transitions, just this is what's on my slide and it comes up. Don't worry about fading in and out or any
Oh,
of that
no.
nonsense.
Because that's the other problem online. The computer's got to then work out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it
once you
starts
get
to
those
jump
in,
around.
then you can get lag from broadband speeds and all sorts.
Exactly.
Just have a solid. This is what's on my slide. These are the words. This is the picture, and it comes up, and nothing changes. The fancier you try to make it, the more chances you got something going wrong.
Yeah, and also the PowerPoint templates generally aren't really very good.
No.
You know, I would stick with a very simple slide. Now, one thing I would say, another opportunity, we have a masterclass on how to present and write your presentations properly, and also come along to our roadshows, because we're always taking people's presentations apart and giving them pointers and guidance. And you'll notice every single time it goes back to a very simple slide with very simple conditions on that slide. Text as big as you can, 5 bullet points, you know, and so on. 2 minutes a slide, so literally you got 5-6 slides with a front and a back cover. That's you done. Anything more than 10 slides, I think I've seen a 25 slide presentation delivered to us before, and basically you're flicking a slide every 15 seconds or so. It's sensory overload. It was too much.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, you got any thoughts, Sam, as somebody who's going to be presenting at some point, of different, maybe just how the presentation might look and feel with PowerPoint or other types of systems?
I think I've luckily got experience of using PowerPoint from my previous job when I worked at Maersk, and we delivered training, so I'm quite well versed with it, which luckily has its transfer across. But I can imagine a lot of people maybe aren't as experienced in it. But it links back to the points that Jon was saying, that the animations aren't actually going to add anything to the presentation. It doesn't make the information any better. It's just something that looks good, but in reality, does it help your presentation? I think we'd all agree that it's not going to help your presentation. And going back to the templates, again, on the face of it, some of the PowerPoint templates might look good, or even some of the company templates you might have might look good, but the reality is you want it nice and clean and simple. You want to be able to see the bullet points, which are then going to prompt you to talk about something, and you're going to have nice clear pictures which you can either refer to, or earlier on in the presentation it's to set the scene of, this is my project.
Yeah, it's good. There's another point you just made there, Sam, which is well made. I would avoid any corporate templates with corporate logos. And absolutely do not use the RICS logo.
No.
Not the fact that you're not allowed to. Well, you're in-house doing an in-house assessment with RICS, so I don't think it would be an issue with many assessors. But you are not actually, until you're chartered, allowed to use the logo with yourself anyway. But it's none of that's got anything to do with it. The reason being is, whenever anyone tries using the RICS logo, they tend to do it wrong. And so if you don't understand the branding, now, unfortunately for you, if you're sat in front of me, I do understand the branding for RICS because I've gone and read about it, and it's all part of, as my mind, conduct and ethics, because you're dealing with your institution's brand. You know, and it's things like white space around the logo. Don't pinch the logo or squash it, and don't make it bigger or smaller than this, you know. And it has to be these colours, and please don't use it as a watermark. That was my favourite one. And you can't take the word RICS away from the picture of the circle lion head either. You know, so when people start then messing around with the logo, they think, oh, it's great to put it on my presentation. No, it's not. Because if you get it wrong, I'm going to probably take you to task. So that, and also the fact, avoid corporate logos, because we're testing you, not your employer. So, you know, you don't need to have that big, beautiful corporate presentation, which again is a bit like PowerPoint templates. It's just distracting, and it's not giving you the space and the white space you might need. Now, some people, let's just deal with this for a moment on diversity and inclusivity. Don't forget, I've got a bit of a chip on my shoulder about diversity and inclusivity when it comes to visuals. Normally, they say a dark background with, you know, like dark blue with yellow text works best. Now, in the past, I would have said, yeah, but if we're trying to print that out, it's not going to work. But if you're now on screen doing that, that might be a way forward. I'm still of the view, though, you go white background with dark text because it's a bit cleaner. It's a bit easier to see. But again, people with visual impairment can have a bit of a challenge with both. but you don't know that. You don't know what your panel is or who they are, so you can only do your best. But the other thing I would add into this, and this is only I know this because of my own experience with one of my children being colourblind, is keep away from reds and greens if you can, and stick with blues and yellows if you're trying to highlight things. So again, just think of the kind of the diversity side of things. The more you can do with that, and let's not lose sight of, was it 1 in 40 men are colourblind, 1 in 250 women are colourblind. We are still in an industry, in an institution which, whilst we do have gender balance heading in the right direction, a lot of your panel will still be male dominated. So, the chance of finding someone who's colourblind is probably going to happen. So, so just be aware of that. But like I say, I only know that really. I'm only aware of it because of my own experience of it. So I do try and just promote that and pass that on a little bit, just to think about it. And it's no hardship putting it in. If you use black text with a blue. With a lighter blue sort of highlight, it works quite nicely. We do it a lot now with our roadshow stuff wherever possible. I'm trying to use yellows and blues. So, yeah.
Okay. Right. We touched on earlier the perils of the leave button and the share button in Microsoft Teams, but I think it's important that we do explain to candidates how they share or screen share in Teams.
Yeah. Okay. So now, before I kind of chomp around on this one, Sam, have you got any thoughts from your experience? Because you said you've not used it much, so you're trying to force yourself to use it. So what have you come across so far that's been a bit of a challenge? And I guess this could be any online system. I mean, I've got people out there who use Google Meet, other people use GoToWebinar, other people use Zoom. It's turned out a bit VHS Betamax, if those of you who are old enough can remember that one.
Yeah.
That, it's kind of Microsoft over Zoom. But interestingly, whilst I think Microsoft still do probably have the market share, I think there's a lot more people, finding a Betamax player back in the day was pretty rare. I think a lot of people are using Zoom. So have you used, from your experience of using whatever systems, where has Teams kind of not caught you out, but it's like, oh, I must remember that?
So the majority of the meetings that I have anything to do with are run on Zoom purely because I like it and it seems intuitive and okay, I want to share my screen, whether it's got audio or not, and have some control over who can come into the meeting room. And I think that's probably come through repetition of using it multiple times a week. It gives me the ability to understand it. So like you mentioned earlier on, I'm going to make a conscious effort to move across to Teams at least once a week. So then I've got the benefit of using both and having...
And is that going to be with your APC group?
It is, yeah. So I'm going to say, for instance, next week on a Tuesday, I'll run it on Zoom. And then on the Thursday, do it on Microsoft Teams, just to get into the routine of having familiarity with it. That's how it works for me. The more I use something, the more I'm going to pick up on, I can do this or I can do that, or I know how to do it. And it becomes second nature, as opposed to on the day, not having the experience and sharing my screen. And then how do I unshare my screen and all of the things that might prompt from that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, good points. So I mean, the only thing I'd add into that, now obviously my biggest chuckle is the sharing button right next to the leave button. And, I think, I can't remember if I said it earlier or we said it off recording. I have been doing presentations before in Zoom where I've gone to click the screen share button, but not paying attention, have actually clicked, and it's miles away in Zoom, managed to click the end button, and it pops up going, leave the meeting or just end the meeting. It's like, no, don't do that. So I've inadvertently, stupidly chatting about something, can't multitask, and then managed to mess it up. But was able to crawl back from the precipice because it gave you that option. And more recently, since probably a couple of weeks ago when I'd mentioned it, it was then I've done a few Zoom meetings and noticed it is literally a click and you're out. So that's the first thing we mentioned earlier. However, now, so when you're screen sharing, so the first thing is, and I guess when you go to click to screen share, you could hit the leave button as well. But what I've noticed with Teams is it doesn't. Now I use a Mac, so whether it's a Mac thing, don't know. But I know there's plenty of people out there who do have Macs as the computers they would be using for the assessments. I've noticed that it doesn't always show all of the windows, because when you click on share screen, it pops up a box at the bottom of the screen of all the available windows that you can open, as in the windows you can share. So when we say window, we mean, the applications you've got turned on. So I think the first thing I would say is minimize all your applications, turn everything off that you don't need, and just have Teams and PowerPoint open. Or Teams and Adobe Reader open if you're just going to show a PDF or whatever it might be. That's absolutely what I would do in the first instance, because otherwise it's not always easy to see the right screen. But the other thing is you just got to practice doing it, and this is one of the reasons we do it as the roadshow. You know, we always say to people, like say, drop in at this time on this day. I'll be online at this link. If you want to drop in and just come do some screen sharing, I'm going to be working in the background. Unless someone drops in, I won't stop what I'm doing elsewhere. But if you do, I'm online. Come and have a play. So I think that would be something to bear in mind. Now, the other thing to be cautious of, if you opt to share your desktop. So that's an option in all of these systems. You can share a particular application, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or whatever, or you can choose to share your desktop. Just on that note, cautionary tales, I guess. Think about what background picture you have. If it's a picture of your family, that's lovely, but you know, I might be tempted just to make it a bit of just a plain background. If you've got other folders that are on there that anyone who's logging in will be able to see, then there could be some GDPR issues there. There could be some client confidentiality issues there. So again, if you are going to share just your desktop, make sure it's clean. You can drop all your folders into another folder called folder. You know, no one will see it or whatever it might be, just for the purpose of when you're doing that. I've sometimes done that and screen shared where I've got a browser open and I might have, 10 or 15 tabs on that browser or the shortcuts I have to various things. I don't necessarily want to share that with everyone else. So, it might be something just to think about. So we always set it to candidates when you're giving presentations with visuals and photographs, always look into the background of the photograph. What else can you see? It's exactly the same with a screen. You're sharing a screen with someone, and so be cautious with that. We also had some recent conversation actually around dual screens. A lot of people will be running dual screens, so you might have your laptop and then another screen plugged into it. And when I get to my new office, I will have the same 2 big screens with the laptop running both. In PowerPoint, there are settings in the setup presentation that you need to go and look at, because if you don't and you share your screen, you might be sharing your presenter screen. And what that is, you have a presentation slide, you have your ribbon of all your slides at the bottom, or your slide deck, some people call it, and you then have your speaker's notes. You don't want to be sharing that screen, you want to share the other screen. So again, learning which screen you're sharing, or to unplug that and just run with a single screen would be something else to bear in mind. But all of these things are things to just please practice and make sure that you know what you're doing. Because on the day, you are going to be very nervous and you want to minimize every possibility of things that go wrong. If it goes wrong assessor side, not your problem. Don't worry about it. We'll fix that or we'll come up with a solution. If it goes wrong your side, we're all sat there staring at you. Okay, and that's never a good experience. So just make sure you bear that in mind.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so I'm a Mac user, and I probably use Teams and Zoom equally. But the biggest problem I've found with Teams is I've never yet, and this might be because my Mac is 5 or 6 years old now, never once have I been able to actually share my screen. Just doesn't work. Just doesn't work.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's because I've got all the full updates on the operating system. I've got the latest version of Teams and everything, but for some reason it just comes up with a black screen and doesn't offer any options for anything to share. It just doesn't work.
There is a common denominator in that though. Who's in there, James?
The Mac, yes.
No, you.
Yeah, so it doesn't work.
Very good response, mate. You paused for a moment there. You didn't walk straight into the bear trap, but no, very good. I'm very impressed. But no, it's a frustration, because if I want to do some training or something, obviously with the training that we do deliver, it's all on Zoom. But if I do want to, I can't share on Zoom because on Teams, it just doesn't work on my computer for no reason known to man, really. I get around it because I don't often need to do presenting. If I'm doing that, I'll do that on Zoom. But it's quite frustrating. It's a strange one, but I know that because I've tried it. I've practiced it, and it comes back to that whole thing. You got to try it.
That's what Sam was saying. He's going to try it once a week, or whatever. If he's doing that, you'll soon find out whether you've got any problems.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing is as well with that though, is because you have practiced it enough. If and when it does go wrong, if it does, on the off chance that it went wrong on the day, you have still an element of sympathy from everyone else in the room as well. And if you can keep a calm head and just fix it and sort it out, then you'll probably get a round of applause and we'll be more impressed, rather than sit there floundering and not really knowing what's going on. I mean, this is a very new thing as well. I mean, 18 months ago, we were using online system. I mean, we've been online for 10 years.
We've only done 2 sessions, haven't we?
Well, exactly. But, as a business, we've been online for over 10 years and we were using, what have we used? Adobe Connect was the thing that we used to use. Very clunky in today's comparison of what we now have. And, it didn't take longer than 2 or 3 months of seeing Teams and Zoom for us to dump that one and go, right, well, this is much better. And here we are 12 months later with 2 very good systems. But I do just tend to find Microsoft just seems to be they just have too many things to click and press and switch. When you really just want to get in it, put a key in it and start it. You don't really want to put it into launch mode and then what colour do I want the dashboard to be or whatever it might be.
What happened to Skype? That seemed to disappear.
Well, Skype for Business was bought out. Well, no, it wasn't bought out. Yes, it was. It was bought out by Microsoft, and Skype for Business was too clunky. And yeah, that was the other thing. We used Skype and all that. And then the Microsoft guys, because if you think about it, it's the same as the marketplace. Everyone accelerated, didn't they, into, oh my goodness, this doesn't work, let's build a better system. And because everyone was subscribing, then the funds were there to put the investment in to then all of a sudden we've got better systems. And Microsoft had bought out, I think they already owned Skype and Skype for Business. And basically they replaced it with Teams because Skype for Business wasn't really good enough.
Yeah, which I think was always their plan anyway, to replace it with Teams. But all of a sudden Teams was quite new and needed to... There were lots of challenges with Teams, which I think is still under development, isn't it, to some extent?
I always have a lot of trouble with Microsoft, not because I'm running a Mac. It's just the login processes and the different functionality you can have, and it just doesn't seem as intuitive as other systems. And that's really, when it comes to it, that's what you need to be at and with. So yeah.
Okay. Right. Well, let's move on slightly, because before we slightly digress there, we were talking about, or we were leading into, what happens if it all goes wrong.
Yes, well, we've mentioned already about if it all goes wrong insofar as, let's say, you can't screen share. I mean, if it all goes wrong and the whole system falls over and you disconnect, well, that's simple. You just reconnect. Same way as you would with a client meeting or anything like that. If it continues to disconnect and not work, then you pretty much got to pack your bags and say, right, well, today's not going to happen then, because that's not going to work. I had that happen to me. It was in a mock interview last session. Mock went perfectly well. We do a 20-minute feedback session afterwards. I got 5 minutes into the feedback and literally the whole internet connection in my house died. Something had gone wrong at the exchange and there was no more internet coming into the house. Now, funny thing was, I ended up with 2 small children, aged 14 and 16, on the door, knocking on the door going, the internet's not working. Oh, what, has your lifeline been strangled out of you all of a sudden? That's a shame. Go away, I'm busy. So I had to then move over to my mobile phone connection, which still was working. So you've got to think about a bit of redundancy on that side of things. And I often say to people, I've got 3 video cameras, I've got 4 microphones, and I've got 2 different internet connections. I'll have 3 different internet connections once I put the office in. I've built redundancy into it, but it's my business, it's what I do. So I think there's an element of connectivity redundancy you've got to bear in mind. So if you've got a phone that's got data on it, to do a full hour and a half with video, you probably need a couple of gig, I would suggest. That would be ample. I think that would be enough. But what if you don't have that? Maybe for that 1 month, you need to look at upgrading your contract on your phone. I don't know. Buy some more data, however much it costs. Don't know. I took the view years ago that we go unlimited data anyway because I didn't want the hassle of that. So, but my business then has to fund that. So think about the data connection. When it comes to visual aids, we've already hinted at, haven't we? Either do nothing, as in present, as I like to call it, present naked. That's not with clothes. That's just no presentation materials.
No, that's with clothes.
Yeah,
John.
with clothes. Please
With clothes.
with clothes. If you ever watched my Apple in the more recent years before Steve Jobs passed away, they used to present, and still do really, with a black screen. And then they would show one image, and that was called presenting naked. Basically, you've not got anything on screen. It's down to you, the presenter. So you're in that situation where you've got to, I think, practice presenting without any visual aids, just in case. Or your backup is you've already thought it through. You've got all your slides in a hard copy, in an A4, because you don't need an A3 anymore, because you just move an A4 nearer the camera. So that's all. So you don't need to spend the extra on an A3 flip chart. But an A3 flip chart or A4 flip chart on the floor, just in case it goes wrong. That's what I would do. And then if that was the case, because you're laying out your room properly and you've got head to your waist and you've got some table space, you can just go, oh, don't worry about it, everybody. I've got some visual aids here. But if you're going to do a visual hard copy visual aid, I would limit the text, and it needs to be more visual than text-based, because then you're relying on the camera and what the panel can see then. But then, you know, you'd all of a sudden, what I would say is, and we were advising people on this before it went to you can only screen share. We were saying, if you think of the middle of the screen, you are one side of that screen, your visual aid is the other side. And then when you put the visual aid out the way, you then readjust yourself to be the center of the screen. So I think practicing maybe that as a backup. I wouldn't want to be presenting without any visual aids, just personally. I just wouldn't want to do it. I would still have something, but it might just be 2 or 3 bullets on a page that are nice and big. But I can move. Don't forget your focal length is as close as you want to put that to the camera. But again, you see, you might want to practice that as well. You know, what if the screen sharing goes wrong? Turn off screen sharing, get your flip chart out, set it up. Because that was the other thing we used to say to candidates was, sit in front of the telly at home and practice putting up your visual aids, your flip chart, and putting it down. It's muscle memory. It should, it shouldn't be difficult. You should literally be able to put it up in a second and it'd be ready. But the number of candidates who, I don't know, again, if you experienced this, James, but the number of candidates I've had to help put up their flip charts at face-to-face presentations when we used to do face-to-face. It was embarrassing, not for me, but it was embarrassing for them. Yeah, they just didn't know how to.
The amount of candidates I've seen over the years who can't operate a simple flip chart.
Yeah, turn the page over. No, seriously, turn the page over.
So clearly no practice. It all comes down to that word practice, doesn't it? I'd like to tell a tale actually of the last session when I was in November last year, because I had a situation as an assessor. Now, luckily, it wasn't during the live interview. But I was it was probably the second of 3 that day, and my internet connection just completely died and kicked me out. So I was in having the candidate had just left the room, and me, the chair, and the other assessor were having a discussion about the candidate, and my internet just died. And that and the reason for that was, my wife was at home, she was working, she was using the internet. I was on Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi couldn't take the amount of use it was having at that particular point in time. So it kicked me out. So now, what do I do now? I'm hardwired in.
Yeah, that's another good
I have an Ethernet cable into my laptop, and it works, and I don't have a problem with the internet going down, because the Wi-Fi signal, if there's lots of other people in the house, it's being used, the Wi-Fi signal will only cope with so much use.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, in a house of 4, so we've got 2 teenage kids, my wife and I, and the dog. Well, okay, add the pets in. A house of 7. Not that the pets are connected Wi-Fi.
Do your pets use iPads and telephones?
Well, they do actually. Yeah.
Are they on Instagram?
Okay. Well, maybe that might be the difference between you and I. I noticed actually, I looked up the browser connectivity, or not, the Wi-Fi connections on the hub, and we had 15 different devices connected. And it was just like, what the hell's that? And then also, I don't know if you've got a Hive system on your heating and everything, that's connected. You've got your TVs plugged into the streaming service, that's connected. Yeah.
Anything smart's going to be connected, yeah.
Yeah, it's everything.
I live in the flat by myself, and I'm quite interested in all the smart tech, and I looked on a similar thing. Every light bulb's then connected to the Wi-Fi, and iPad, phone, computer, TV.
Yeah.
the heating, it ends up just being a huge strain on.
Oh yeah, in our house we've probably got anything up to about 10 or 11 devices connected to the Wi-Fi at any time.
Yeah,
because we've got Amazon
why,
devices, televisions,
it's definitely
skyboxes.
hardwiring. Definitely hardwiring is where you've got.
So I thought it was worth mentioning because that was a problem I had, and so luckily it wasn't during an actual interview or an assessment, which would have been embarrassing for me as an assessor, but it was afterwards, and thankfully I resolved that problem before the following interview. But it was it's worth noting, and I think if you can just buy yourself an extra long Ethernet cable and plug it into the router.
It's not expensive.
No, and really not expensive.
Yeah. What's your thoughts, Sam? What's your game plan for your backups?
For my backups, I'm going to have a physical copy that I can, in theory, present and be well versed and practiced in it. Not as much as my presentation. I'm going to prioritize. I understand that, but to have a backup, as I alluded to earlier on, I'm quite fortunate to have the background in presenting, but you're only as good as your last presentation, and you need to know your subject matter. There's only so much waffle that you can do, and people will see through it.
Yeah.
In terms of guidance, somebody pointed out a few months ago that, and I've started trying to watch one a week, the TED Talks, regardless of the subject, they're really good to watch someone presenting. They're very knowledgeable in the subject they're presenting, but to see and try and pick up on any of the mannerisms, if they've got any filler words, the generic ones are M and R and so and things are attached to that. But you can also do it when you're watching the TV. Watch the news presenters and how good they are, and then watch maybe a reality TV show where the presenters might not be as good and they're not as professional, and try and pick up on any of the traits that you would like to follow or any of the traits that you would not like to follow.
Now that's really interesting, because I'll let you into a secret here. Many years ago, at the start of when I was presenting, you develop your own style basically, and you can copy others to a certain extent, but it's always good to observe. But when I was face-to-face presenting, certainly the assessor training, a lot of people would say to me that it was some of the best training they've been to, and it was great fun, and and if you think about it, I was stood at the front speaking for 7 hours. Now, that's quite a task in itself. I actually based a lot of my delivery around stand-up comedians.
Yeah, that's one that I hadn't ever considered.
Yeah, which I'd watched.
Interesting.
And, there was things like, if I was to pick them out, it would be the likes of Lee Evans or Dara O'Brien, those sort of things. So, and as any of those who might be on things like... was it James Corden? James Corden, not so much, but those who would be presenting out there, trying to engage with an audience. I'd be presenting to a room of sort of between 30 and 50 people, and trying to keep them motivated and engaged, and they would be solidly engaged for the full 7 hours, because it was full of anecdotes, it was full of experience, it was full of, and this is what your APC presentation is about. It's about you.
Yeah.
And that's where, obviously I'm not a comedian, not entirely sure I could do stand up, but just taking little gems from different people and sort of just working that in and really just having that sort of smile about you in everything that you're doing, that actually you're having good fun and enjoying it as well. And that was because training as an assessor is probably quite a dull subject.
Yeah, that's some good advice there, I think, Sam. Very good. But I just want to pick you up on something that you didn't list out there, was the fact that people could go to the Surveyor podcast on YouTube and watch our presentation skills. Indeed. Because we're all both extremely natural, and you don't get many better presenters than John or I.
Yeah, I would second and
but there we go. I just wanted to pick you up on that, Sam. And then just to answer your point there, John, yeah, you couldn't be a comedian.
No, indeed not. This is about as far as I would venture into trying to be
trying to actually be funny.
Yeah, to actually be funny. Most of it is just you taking the mick out of me that gets the laughs, really.
Well, that's it. So
I'm sure it goes both ways.
that segues us nicely into any pitfalls or mistakes that you might have seen over the last assessments, sort of 20 years or so that you've been doing it.
Yeah, there's plenty. I think if I I'll split this into two. What have I seen people do anyway, and what have we seen more recently with online? So generally, I think the biggest pitfall for me, and it's whenever I'm running our presentation course and stuff like this that we're talking about APC presentation, is just reminding people you're there to present, you're not there to read. And about 40%, I'd say 40% of the candidates I've had experience of at the real deal assessments and the mock interviews will sit in front of us and they'll read a script. And it doesn't work. I mean, I've seen, you see the big presenters of the world, I guess the presidents and leaders of countries, and they got auto cue that's scrolling up. And they're, looking, and it's on those glass panes, so you can't see it, and you can see through them, so the cameras still all work and everything, and they're looking from one side to the other because then there's two, that's not what the APC is about. I mean, I've always said to candidates, I will have, and I did a presentation, what was that? It was probably yesterday. I was doing one. It was like 110 slides long. I didn't actually have, I had the slides printed out, as in 3 slides to a page, because I work 2 or 3 slides ahead. So you don't have a pause where you go, what's the next slide? Oh, yes, this. You kind of lead into the next slide by saying, oh, and let's talk about this. And miraculously, that's what the next slide is about. It's just a technique. But absolutely having some speaker's notes is important, but just not reading them. And that's one of the biggest challenges, because, this is professional presenting, not professional reading. That was lovely, but what I'd like you to do is actually now put those notes away.
We're not at school and it's not a reading test.
No, exactly. And tell me about what you've been doing. I often say to candidates, it's just like going away on holiday, not that we've done that recently, and coming back with thousands of pictures nowadays, because your phones can take thousands. James, do you remember we used to have 24 pictures or 12 in a in a camera?
Yes, I do.
Sam's a bit too young for that. Where you then have to send it away to be processed, and then you'd hope you get some decent pictures back, not blurred ones that you put your thumb over the lens on. Or now you're just clicking away, and there's even a button, if you hold your finger on it, it takes 100 pictures in less than that many seconds. So it's like coming back from that and chatting people through what you were doing, where you're at, and what you're up to. And it's that sort of air of sort of experience and interest and enthusiasm that we're looking for, and that sometimes doesn't come through. The other one is really bad visual aids. Obviously, we talked a lot around visual aids, but there's a knack to producing them as well. Now, again, the APC roadshows are quite good fun because people send in their presentations, and some we just tweak a little bit and go, oh, do it a bit here and a bit there. Others we literally strip apart and go, nah, I wouldn't do anything like that. And putting block text on and then reading it. Oh, that was one. I was at a CPD club. I was a member of in Milton Keynes years ago, and the presenter last minute couldn't turn up, so he sent a colleague. Do you know what that guy did? He said, I brought his presentation, and he literally just clicked each slide for us. Have a read of that, click the next one. And that was it for half an hour. Now, I was part of the membership, or part of the team that ran that network club, and we were sat there at the front, going, oh my goodness, oh dear, what have we now let ourselves in for? And it was shockingly bad. So yeah, block text, forget all of that. Don't read off your slides. They should be there to embellish. And again, things like blurred images, health and safety. There's you with a picture of a site where all the Harris fencing has blown down because the night before was windy. Why did you take that picture? First thing you should have been doing is pull the fence back up.
Yeah, or somebody's walking behind with no hard hat on or high vis.
Exactly. Absolutely, absolutely. And we've all seen it as assessors, and you're looking at the picture going, no, surely they didn't put that in. And then the other one was, it's completely confidential, and there you are with the client's logo on the hard hat of the selfie you just took. What an idiot. How do I know your client was? And then you watch the blood drain out of their faces. They think, well, how do you know that? Sort of thing. Well, because it's in your picture. Oh, my favourite one, I probably shared this before, was the building surveyor who did a refurbishment of a bank. Did I tell you that one?
No.
Yeah, refurbishment of a bank in the case study imagery was a plan of the back of house with the strong room and everything shown on it.
Yes.
And then we then challenged that and said, that's interesting. Would that not be confidential information? Oh, well, you notice I did anonymise it. Yes, you did. But on the next appendix, where you gave the cost breakdown, you had the address of the bank. And if I get your attention to the front cover, there's a photograph of the front of the bank on the, and it's just like, do you not think that's confidential information to tell us where the safe is? So silly things like that as well. And then online, I think more of it is manic mouse moving. So that's one thing. So your mouse pointer.
The new clicking of the pen.
Well, yes, there is that. That could actually be right, couldn't it? The new clicking of the pen.
Unless you're Sam who clicks the pen, but
I still click it.
He's still got a pen in his hand.
Yeah, we've irreparably damaged Sam on that one. You realise?
Never
Every time
again.
he comes anywhere near us, he checks. He puts his pen down. So but I think also I on my Mac I've got one of these magic mice that it's called the Apple Mac Magic Mice. I've noticed when I'm presenting, even you can very unintentionally jump a slide. So what I tend to do on presentations that are really important, I don't want to jump a slide. I put the mouse to one side and use the uppy downy keys on the keyboard. Because the Apple mice are brilliant because you can swipe them and touch this or that, whatever. But when you're presenting, it annoyingly does jump. So moving your mouse across the screen and the mouse pointer a lot is one thing. The other one is when you're jumping forward and backward slides when you're going too quick or too slow. I've noticed, and obviously not sharing the screen correctly, which is what we've talked about a lot today, and not understanding then how that kind of all impacts on everything. So. My goodness, what a lot we've got through.
We have got through a lot, and that brings us.
So Sam, what are you going to take away from this, Sam? That you're going to jack it and not do your presentation, go and do some other career, or
I'm
found something useful out of this that you've learned.
I'm far too much invested now to change tact.
No.
My takeaway. I mean, without sounding particularly arrogant, I was relatively well versed on what I was planning on doing. I planned on having visual aids. I planned on practicing and watching some more TED Talks and this sort of thing. As an action point for me, I'm definitely going to make myself familiar with the Teams platform to take that stress away on the day, even dialing in if anything drops out, to make sure that I'm well versed in that.
Yeah.
You know why you're well versed though, Sam? I'm going to do a plug for Jon because you attend the APC Roadshow.
Exactly.
I have to say, I mean, not wishing to blow our own trumpet on that, I'm going to go no anyway. I mean, we're a year into it now, 52 weeks. We just did week 52 this week. And I have to say, I'm still thoroughly enjoying it as much as the first day I delivered it. And I think that shows probably in the way that, the numbers are increasing and we're getting a lot more people coming along to it and everything. But yeah, the fact of the matter that we can take people's presentations and just kind of chop them up and go, make it your own, but do it like this. I mean, someone did recently ask me for a presentation template, to which I responded going, I'll put one on our free page as a PDF, but I'm not giving you the PowerPoint slides already made. You need to go and do that yourself, because I don't want you all to become John Lever clones when it comes to, the slides. You've got to have your own style in there. But if you follow these very basic techniques, and very sort of basic thought processes, then you won't go far wrong. But yeah, the roadshow's been absolutely fantastic. And I guess, for those who don't know about it, just come to our website, deleve.com/APC Roadshow. Low cost, high output, I think, so for what people are getting. So
I think definitely when you compare it to the cost of formal CPD, it's considerably cheaper than.
Well, you can come. Was it £4.98 a month?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like it's the price of a coffee you can't go out and buy.
Exactly. Nobody's been to the pub.
You're not going out and buying the coffee, so you might as well invest it in the roadshow. No, it's money aside. We didn't do it for the money. We've done it just to sort of give people that opportunity, and also there's plenty of people out there trying to do this on their own with no support. So just having that community there is important.
Yeah, that was exactly why I started coming, John.
Yeah, and hopefully long may it continue, because we'll get you up there presenting and stuff once you're chartered. So now, on that note, how far away are you from your assessment? You're going for the autumn, aren't you?
Yes.
So you're 5 months out, and you're already thinking about your presentation.
Yes, I've got the presentation drafted, but none of the information's gone in yet because I haven't finished my case study. So once that's finished and finalized, it'll be transferred across.
Yeah, spot on. That's exactly what I'd advise. I used to advise, you handed it all in and submitted, and then you did your presentation. And in the last 5 years, if not a bit longer, we changed tack on that completely. And that came out of watching candidates present to us on the day, where their presentations and case studies had very little visuals that crossed over, and it wasn't very good. So running the two next to each other, I think, is very wise. So, and it's great. I mean, it's great to see. And like you say, isn't it sort of a testament to the fact you had a job that was presenting, that that makes it so much easier because you've been there and done it.
I guess I've got a lot more thought process behind. At the minute, you can't see, I'm kind of sat on my hands. Otherwise, I'd be waving them around, pointing at things and talking about things. And that's the way that I get around it, by either hold my hands together, because I know all I want to do is point at things when there's nothing on the screen to point at all.
Yeah. And I found myself doing that, though, pointing at the screen when you're presenting online and thinking you're an idiot. No one else can see what you're pointing at. And so on, which is, I think, again, it's a good thing to think about. And on that note of you as your best visual aid as well, think about anyone. This could be blokes and women. Just think about jewelry you might be wearing, rings, bangles, anything like that could clonk on the table. Also, we recently, I think, mentioned at one of the road shows, think about your notes as well, of rattling paper, and because the microphones are going to pick all that up as well. So there's loads of more information we can sort of impart, and thoughts and ideas. So maybe we'll do that in future podcasts. But I think that's alleviated my frustration of people saying hold things up at the screen or don't use any visual aids, James. So thanks, James and Sam, for allowing me to get that off my chest.
I like to allow you time to get things off your chest, Jon.
You're very kind.
I know what you like otherwise.
Yeah. Well, even if you didn't, I'd just say it anyway.
Yeah, to be fair, you've never needed my permission for it before. Anyway.
It's just nice to have the chat, isn't it? It's nice to have a chat amongst friends. And it's great that we've had you on board today, Sam, as well, because obviously you're giving that perspective of some poor soul, bunny rabbit in headlights, that you're going to be in 6 months' time, 7 months' time. And that you're already thinking about it and already kind of coming up against these things. So it kind of validates really what we're saying in a way, I guess. I hope
it does. Well, I mean, that's whisked us through it, but brings us to the end, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. How exciting this was. So, any last thoughts?
From me, it would be, and we've mentioned this, and everyone mentions exactly the same thing. You need to be practicing. You need to be well versed in it, and it needs to be second nature, not, I can't remember what's on the next slide or anything like that. It needs to be practiced. You need to practice at Teams. You can even go as far as recording yourself and do it to yourself over the. I pointed my hand there. I've got to sit back down on it. Pointed at the screen. So to surmise, to practice.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think the recording point is really valid as well. Again, I'm not sure if you need a Teams account to be able to record in Teams. I think you do. There are different Microsoft accounts out there where you don't get Teams. You can only join as a member or as a guest. You can't actually run a thing. So if that was the case, any system, and again, Zoom's free for 40 minutes worth of recording, anything, it doesn't matter, as long as you're getting that, this is how I looked, this is how I sounded, because a lot of people don't like the sound of their own voice. I don't think that's ever a factor for James and I, but a lot of people don't like it, and then it's just getting used to, actually, what, I sounded like that. I actually don't hear anything different to what I sound like recorded to what I sound like when I'm talking. So, and I'm always the perfectionist, thinking, I could have said that a bit differently. I won't do that next time or whatever.
Jon, that's just because you've spent too much time listening to yourself.
I probably have. Yeah, no one else does. And maybe this podcast is just venting that frustration, James, for you and I. But I think the numbers are showing quite high, aren't they?
Well, I mean, before I started doing this podcast with you, I never really liked hearing my own voice, and actually, I mean, many people will probably argue that that's not true, but I didn't like listening to it. Whereas since we started doing this, I really quite enjoy listening to myself.
Yeah, it's quite strange, but we seem to be getting some good stats as well. So on that note, then I guess we ought to finish in the accustomed fashion, which is wash your face, wash your hands, and
Don't lick any strangers.
Don't lick any strangers. Yeah, very important. Thanks, guys.
We'll see you all again next week.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
We won't see you, but you'll hear.
I know.
From
Yeah,
us.
we'll publish this one pretty soon, and I think this is really a really good topic out there for anyone who is really focusing on the assessment to have a good listen to. So let's make sure we make everyone aware that it's available as well.
Yes.
All right then. Catch up with you soon. Cheers, guys. Take care.
Cheers, guys.
Bye. Hello there, and thank you for joining us for our latest episode of the Surveyor Podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed making it. Don't forget to subscribe at all your favourite podcast providers, Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio and so on. Also on Twitter and Instagram at SurvPod, that's SURVPOD. You can also get us on YouTube, click the subscribe button and don't forget to click the little bell, it tells you when we post our latest content, and on our webpage survpod.com. Don't forget to leave us your reviews, comments, suggestions, and of course, any questions. And finally, if you want to come along, join us at a future episode of the Surveyor Podcast, send us an email to survpod@gmail.com. If you like what you see and hear, tell your friends, let's put surveying on the map. Stay safe, wash your hands, and don't lick any strangers. Bye-bye for now. The Surveyor Podcast is a copyright Deliver and Invise Limited production. We suggest you come up with your own ideas and not copy ours. Thank you. Catch you again soon. Bye-bye.